We're in the process of removing a bridge that has been condemned for 10 years over the Metolius River, and to do that we have a rigging crew from the Columbia Gorge.
The Tract E bridge is a few hundred yards upstream from the Camp Sherman Store. It was built in the 1960s to access a single home on the west bank of the river.
We want to take it out piece by piece as cleanly as possible. Unfortunately, most of it is extremely rotted. And so that's, you can see why we have such a efficient line of folk getting all the debris we dunk into the water.
To remove the old bridge without damaging the pristine river, the Forest Service called in a crew that specializes in overhead rigging systems.
What we have is a high-line system, very similar to a high-lead logging operation. Instead of using a single spar tree, we actually climbed 4 trees, and then a bridle block strung between 2 trees on either side of the bridge, and then we can use the heavy equipment, we can use our winch, and once that high line is connected onto whatever piece of material we're moving, it is lifting up into the air. We have another set of systems, one to pull and another to put a brake on.
They started by taking down the railings, then disassembled the deck materials, the surface on which cars once drove and people walked on. Then they removed the stringers. Those are heavy logs that supported the deck.
Piece by piece, and it's just cleaner that way. If we try to rely on any of the structural supports to maintain that structural rigidity as we lifted it up, it's just disintegrating and bonking together and falling in the river.
Each stringer is a little bit different. Some are more decomposed than others, so we just really kind of pay attention to what's going to happen on that. And just as a safety point is, we know that any one of those could go or something could happen, so having our escape route planned so that we don't, get snagged up by one of these logs. So.
Everyone involved in the operation, whether standing on the bridge, in the water, or on shore pulling cables, uses an agreed-upon series of verbal commands and hand signals for safety.
We do so much rigging in the Columbia River Gorge. Our crew has pretty dialed down a set of communication protocols for when you want to take slack, when you want to raise it, when you want to stop, when you want to pull. Especially working with heavy equipment, if somebody can't hear you, you always want to make sure that those protocols are highly developed. You don't want to get in a situation where you're telling somebody to stop and they think you're telling them to pull.
I noticed people on the far bank watching the project, taking pictures, so I went over to visit.
So we've been coming here for at least 35. We haven't figured it out yet, but a long time. Remember, we used to drive over it, very easy. And then we've been walking over it, of course, since years, unfortunately. Can't drive over it, but changed our pattern. We had to get an easement through Cold Springs to come through, since this was closed.
This diverse crew of trail managers, bridge workers, biologists, and hydrologists spent a week removing the bridge. They weren't certain they'd be able to pull the bridge pilings out of the riverbed with the overhead rigging system, so that phase of the project may come later.
I would always want to be an engineer. I mean that. I love public works projects. As our city council 16 years, I love the public works projects.
From the Metolius River near Camp Sherman, I'm Brooke Snavely for The Great Outdoors.